So I watched the Drink Champs with my husband the other day, and it was the Kanye West one. And I took a lot of messages from it actually, but two that stood out was his statement about crabs in a barrel that he kind of got from Jay-Z, and then also a statement that resonated with me so much because I love ego work and the mind, and it's so true that the ego and anger are like best friends, like blood, like related. And I think it's because we all get triggered in some way and we don't understand what trigger. I think we're all just kind of awakening to the way the mind works and what triggers actually are, and it's basically coming from some wound that may have not been acknowledged or aware of, something that happened in your past that when something is happening in your present moment, you carry that emotional baggage, and it can make something that is smaller seem very big because it's not just that experience you're feeling that and all the other ones that kind of seem associated or related to that. And so anger is the first line of defense for a lot of us, because it's the easiest emotion to have because it seems stronger and not defenseless or vulnerable, which is a feeling, or vulnerability is a state of being that a lot of us are very, very uncomfortable with, because affection, intimacy, vulnerability are not things that we saw growing up, because those are not seen as survival tactics. They're seen as weak or not allowing, or you're not gonna make it out here. As black people, we've had to learn how to have tough skin, but in that we become very, very hard. The skin basically becomes a rock, and then in the inside there's so much pain, so much softness, so much hurt, and that shield becomes a brick wall, and that nothing can come in or out. But it just kind of made me also reflect on relationships, and I don't mean just like with the partner or spouse, or I mean just any interaction or relationship with anyone, friendship, parent, whatever, that I feel like we all carry some level of fear of abandonment, fear of rejection. And I feel like those are some of the biggest triggers we have. And so it can be something as simple as someone disagreeing with you, someone not texting you back, someone not liking your pictures, or not giving you enough compliments. It's just basically things that don't feed your ego, things that don't fill your void, things that you perceive as them not supporting you. You perceive it as them not being a good friend or this or that. And honestly, that could be possibly true, because you do have a lot of people who are one-sided, and they rarely see that they don't put nothing into relationships. But a lot of times we also have to look at within ourselves and see, like, why are we demanding and needing so much validation from other people? And we have to start to look within and build that self-confidence, build that self-love, and just embody the knowing and the worth and the esteem. As Dr. Joy DeGruy talks about in post-traumatic slave syndrome, a lot of us have a vacant esteem, and that's why our egos are our biggest defense, but it's our biggest mask and persona as well, because a lot of times it's just masking the pain that we've held for centuries. And the reason why I always say, like, black people have a different perspective and a deeper wound is because, yes, there are a lot of inner child wounds, and that's kind of that how we all have that abandonment, fear of abandonment and fear of rejection. But for black people, I feel like it goes deeper than the inner child and our past personal experiences. I feel like we also carry the ancestral wound, which is also within the root chakra. People talk about the inner child and all that, but the ancestral wounds are what also the foundation of us in essence. And so we have to look at that as well. So yeah, you may have an abandonment wound from something you had from your parents, but their parents had that as well, and their parents and their parents. And when you go straight back to the theory of slavery, just think of it like you can theorize the idea. That was the ultimate abandonment. We were stuck between a rock and a hard place. We felt abandoned by our own people, you know, for being the ones who were on the ship. And then we felt abandoned because when we got our masters clearly did not nurture and coddle and protect and make us feel safe. So and then in society, we feel this constant feeling of rejection and exile and not fitting in. And so we're constantly assimilating and trying to fit in and trying to mold and bend and twist and all these things to be accepted. And it's like you have to realize that you may never be seen as the same. But what you have to find comfort in is, why do you even reflect on, why do you even want to be seen as the same? Why do you even need to be accepted? The moment you realize that you don't need to be accepted by anyone, that you don't have to look like everyone else, you don't have to conform, that you are a unique being and that you can express yourself and be yourself, that is the moment when you will be revered. And that is the moment when people will start to want to come to your club, and you don't have to go begging to be a part of their club, because you're going to be the example of spiritual liberation, coming out of the spiritual closet, spiritual freedom. You know what I'm saying? So just reflect on a lot of these things and ask yourself, in what ways do you get triggered? In what moments do you go from 0 to 100? Like, in what ways do you feel enraged or extremely overwhelmed by things that people do? And what ways do people aggravate you or frustrate you? Like, look into those things, because that's basically, triggering. And what ways do you feel sad or depressed? Like, just basically, when do you feel out of control of your emotions and thoughts and whatnot? And just see where they can stem from. And ultimately, it's not even seeing where it can stem from. It's just figuring out what are the steps you can take to be aware and to be more responsive than reactive. And when you start to look at the patterns and see the history and look at your family from a higher perspective, and the patterns that you probably have been unconsciously or subconsciously living out and repeating, the more and more you can address these issues and heal. But yeah, guys, as always, peace, love, light. Keep God first. Peace out. So just piggybacking off of my other post on triggers of abandonment and rejection, I just kind of wanted to elaborate on it a little more. And with the hardening of your skin becoming a rock, putting up this wall, this hard wall that some people say, you have to open yourself up to love for it to come. You have to open yourself up to attune to abundance, because the vibration you've been sitting in is not a vibration that's going to attract anything. It's going to keep you in a state of misery. And you're only going to be attracting the people who relate to that energy. And that's why they say misery loves company. But honestly, you're the one that's attracting that misery, because that's the state you're in. Yes, you're going to continue to get people who, as you were saying, their resistance is going to be trying to pull you back. But you have to fight against that. But also what I wanted to say was, when it comes to anger and a lot of times how we react to our triggers, there's something that is, I don't know if it's called this, but I just feel like it should be. It's called like the iceberg effect, where basically an iceberg is, I believe the Titanic is what it was on, but it's like, think about you're in the ocean and there's this big ice chunk sitting on the surface of the ocean. You see a small tip of it or, what seems small, but underneath it's like 3 to 4 times bigger, extending down underneath the ocean, just floating in the ocean. And so it's kind of the idea that what you see on the surface is nowhere near what is under the surface. Like, you only see the final result. You only see the straw that broke the camel's back. You don't know what all it was carrying at first that made that straw be the last straw that the camel's back could hold. So that goes with the mind too. Like, what we think and deal out of is like the tip of the iceberg, which is the subconscious and the conscious. But the unconscious part of our system of self is like the bottom of the iceberg that we can't see, that we don't know all the underlying trauma, all the underlying emotional baggage that we have. And that's, to me, every behavior, every big emotion has a hidden iceberg under it. And so you may see anger, and usually anger is not necessarily, to me, an emotion. It's more of an action, because people don't never really associate that you're angry unless you're doing something that seems violent or scary. So because if I'm walking around and I'm saying I'm very angry, and that's all, I'm very angry at you, they're gonna be like, you're not angry. Until I start throwing, breaking something, screaming to the top of my lungs, cursing you out, disrespecting you, choking you, something, then I'm not really angry. So that's why I say I associate it more with the behavior. But by the time it's gotten to the behavior or the rage or the actions of what we perceive or associate with anger, there's so much underlying that behavior. There could be worthlessness. There could be feelings of rejection. There could be feelings of abandonment. There could be hungry. There could be stressed. There could be sexually frustrated. There could be there's so many egoic and human needs and desires and wants or whatever that are underlying that final behavior, that final reaction that we see as rage, anger, yada yada. That's why I don't like the narratives that are perpetuated of, angry black female, angry black male, because by the time a black person is angry or enraged, first of all, our rage and anger is justifiable. We're carrying centuries of oppression and all this trauma on our backs, and we've been carrying it with grace for so long. It's gonna be a straw that breaks the camel's back eventually. But it's like when you put those narratives for people who are constantly trying to assimilate, like me, who have this complex of wanting, who did have a complex of wanting to be accepted by the systems that are designed to disempower you and make you feel degraded and less than. It makes you feel uncomfortable to express yourself when you're trying to not be the stereotype, when you're trying to not be seen as this or that. But the thing is, what you don't understand is those narratives are specifically put into place to keep you spiritually stuck, emotionally stagnant. You are allowed as a human to express and release those emotions, to express and release those traumas, to express and release whatever is holding you down. It doesn't mean in a violent way. It doesn't mean whatever. It means you can find a way to exalt or diffuse or exert that energy. You have to find ways to release that energy. And it's not like, oh, just let it go. No, I don't mean that. I mean, you literally have to physically find ways to use that energy as a force of creativity and do something with it. Whether it's protesting, whether it's conversations, whether it's journaling, whether it's creative writing, whether it's a podcast, whether it's whatever. Entrepreneurship, I think you should channel it into shifting the focus and financial, economic power and generational wealth. Shift your focus and stop making people force you to feel like there's healing is the only thing. The healing is also by changing the destiny and breaking the curse of staying in the same, like not elevating, like not having success, not having joy, because a lot of times we get stuck in shadow work and doing the healing process that we lose sight of, that our ancestors have been working for centuries. It's time to play. It's time to have fun. It's also time to, it's just about being accountable and not letting someone hold things over your head like you're so broken and like you are so messed up and you're so this and that. Everything is a fine balance. It's about the mastery of self, understanding yourself, understanding, taking that accountability, being able to have mature, dignified conversations. But also not letting people project their feelings, like their colonized viewpoints. Because I mean, like, people think that because you yell or you raise your voice that you don't know how to regulate your emotions. To me, I'm like, no, you don't know how to regulate yours because you're taking yelling and you feel some type of way because I'm yelling. I'm just passionate. I'm expressing myself. If we let people continue to tell us too much stuff, we're gonna be micromanaged again. And once us again, I was like, we're gonna be getting out of the confinement and going right back into the confinement because people are gonna be over meticulous and over analytical and controlling you to the point of neurotic behavior again. And we're trying to get out of that space. Like, if you feel like yelling, you yell, whatever. But my thing is, everything comes to that moral compass of the balance that you have. What I use is, long as I'm not degrading a person, hitting below the belt, belittling them, manipulating them with, like, gaslight. I don't like that word, but gaslighting tactics and whatnot. Making a person feel like they're the issue. Long as I'm able to take that accountability, which is the foundation of it, then ultimately me yelling or raising my voice is my form of expression at that moment. If I feel like that's the place I need to go, maybe that's where I needed to be to get your attention and to let you know that I'm not the one to be played with. I'm going to establish my boundaries and keep them. So that's just kind of what I want to say about that and elaborate on my the other video I made on triggers. You ever had a person ask you a question that irritated you, or a situation happened to you and you literally had a whole conversation or argument in your head based on it on that experience or that question? Like, for example, I don't know if it's just me or a black thing, but people say, "You good?" or "How's everything?" Sometimes you take it as a personal attack, like, "Dang, bro, I look like something wrong with me or something." Like, sometimes I feel like for black people it's hard to be positive, and that comes from a person who has a very dark who was in a very dark, obsessive mind, like me. I perceived everything as the worst case scenario, and I just always assumed the worst in people. So it's like, you ask me, "You good?" I'm like, "Dang, do I look good?" Like, what you trying to make them get in their head or something? And it's like, instead of blaming them, I need to look at myself and be like, why did that question of pure concern or just a basic question spark and trigger me? Maybe because there is something wrong. And that's my ego's defense mechanism. See, I ain't really got on touch on defense mechanisms yet, but yeah. We got coping mechanisms and defense mechanisms. And sometimes having that anger or that defensive dialogue in our head or out loud, sometimes it's with them. It's kind of like, some people are more confrontational, so they may have it out loud, and they may say, honestly, the people who are more confrontational, I feel like, have less anxiety, because a lot of times they get what they're thinking out in the open, and they're more outspoken, and generally they're either proven wrong and that dispels their thought, or they're proven right and it further confirms their thought. So sometimes don't be so afraid of confrontation and just get the thought out there. But, maybe think about your delivery. If you have some kind of concern, then address it either with yourself or with that person or situation. Like, what happened to me earlier? I think I was on a freeway and somebody cut me off, and I was just like, going back and forth, like, oh my God, just getting PO'd. And I was just like, well, shoot, I'll do it too. Or, or I'm like, oh no, I did something wrong. And I feel like the person got mad and they kind of sped around me and went, and then I'm like having this whole full-fledged argument with them. I'm like, yeah, like, you don't get like you ain't never got the wrong turn, or you just you, and I'm sitting here like rationalizing my whole thing because I felt kind of like embarrassed or uncomfortable and awkward at that moment. Tell me you ain't never just like did something like wrong when you was driving, or like, you know how you don't let a person go in front of you or someone, they done pulled up right next to you, you kind of like looking straight, you don't want to make that eye contact because you feel a little awkward. And it's like you have these dialogues in your head. That's why I like the Insecure, because she really touches on the inner dialogue that people have in their mind when they're going through life. You can that's normal. That's actually kind of healthy, because you're trying to rationalize your thoughts and trying to figure out, is this something that's actually worth me getting riled up about or not? And generally it's not. So I just want to kind of ask you guys, like, is that something that you deal with too? And if so, I mean, maybe take a look into that. And the next time you want to pop off, or, you know, have this defense mode and, you know, get upset or get angry, just maybe take it for what it is, and they're just asking you a question. If something triggers you, triggers are, I always say, triggers are teachers. They're the best teachers, because they show you what you need to look at within yourself. It's never the person. It's usually something going on within yourself. Quiet the egos. Need to protect the things you need to work on, because it doesn't want you to realize that it's feeding you a false sense of self. And by proving it wrong, and by actually confronting the mind, either internally in your own personal inner dialogue, or externally by getting it out there, just, you know, doing something to break that down, like speaking to somebody if you have a prejudiced thought, or just answering the question like, oh no, I'm good, thanks for asking, though, you know, and just see where it goes from there. Or just be like, hey, do I seem okay, or do I look alright? And, you know, they may say, oh yeah, girl, I just be speaking to everybody and just checking on everybody, like that's just me. You're like, oh okay, because I was kind of getting in my head. You know, it's okay to have these confessions sometime and just breaking the ice. These mental health icebreakers is gonna be essential in healing. I really truly believe in what I call vent work, like venting and sharing these stories, and being vulnerable at times with people you feel safe with. You know, realizing that what you're going through, you're definitely not alone, and it's not something that's just out of the abnormal, you know. And it's just like, this is a whole nother video, but the stigma around mental health for Black people, I feel like out of all people, bro, why don't we get to need help? Why don't we get to get therapy or stuff without this stigma of being weak, or thrown off, or, you know, these things that have been infiltrated in our culture to further, how can I say, further perpetuate the dysfunction of our community, of our culture, because things are being put in our culture that are creating these negative stigmas around getting the help we need. When out of all the oppression that we've gone through, we're definitely not the last people who would need it. We're the main people who would need it, and it's okay. I know a lot of times we like to keep our dysfunction secret, because for the sake of, you know, the image of how we want our community to look. But I'm not saying go and blast it all across social media, but I'm saying that it is something that you can have these family meetings, these therapy sessions with someone who you trust, with your pastor, with anybody, you know, people who are not judgmental, people who are not trying to put their own personal biases or prejudices into the well-being of you. It is okay, people. But yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and end this one. As always, someone who cares, a spiritual activist. Peace, love, light, and healing energies. Be open to receiving them. Keep God first. I love you guys. Peace out.